Hey guys, Grand J here, and welcome to another one of our Final Fantasy TCG set reviews. So in today's video, we'll be talking about the ice cards in Opus 3. So let's get started. First card is Emina. So Emina is a 2-cost backup, and when it comes to so while it's in play, the cost to play Kazusa and Kurozame are reduced by 1. They can't become 0. So yeah, obviously it's a 2-cost backup. It's really efficient, really cheap to put in. So at least on that side, it's got like a big tick there. In regards to its ability, Kazusa is a 2-cost backup that makes your opponent discard, and Kurozame is a 5-cost 9,000 power forward that freezes two of your opponent's forwards. In this regard, this card will obviously only really see play in a deck that's running at least one of these, if not both of these cards. The Type 0 Ice deck has gotten like a lot of really cool tools in this set, and it seems like it's like a really strong sort of control style deck between the Lassies and between getting able to put Kazusa and Kurozame in for very cheap. It seems like a cheap and efficient way to just sort of lock down your opponent and sort of like smuggle them, to stifle them into sort of like being unable to play their stuff. So in this regard, this card will probably see play. The only problem is that there's ice is a very popular color, and there's various variants of ice, and the existing ice decks are already pretty good in regards to they have Renault, they have Vayne, they have all these really strong cards already. So I'm not sure that this card is going to be strong enough to sort of like take what we currently see as ice away from the pedestal. That being said, though, it's a good card, and definitely in the sort of deck that plays this, I can definitely see it. I can definitely see it being played. But as of right now, I don't think it's good enough to compete against what Ice already has. That being said, though, if it was sort of a more tempo-orientated Ice deck, which I think the metagame is actually moving more towards a sort of tempo-orientated game, so I think that this card is solid. It's just up to time to tell whether this card can make a good Ice deck or not. So, next card, continuing on from Emina, is Kazusa. So Kazusa is a 2-cost backup. When it enters play, both players discard a card from their hand, and he's got an ability dull, break, put Kazusa into a break zone. Each player discards 1 card from their hand. So obviously this is a card that you want to play with Emina, because just making him a 1-cost backup is really good. It just means that you can play him by just tapping a backup, and if you've got Emina, that generally means you're just going to tap Emina and put this guy into play. The downside is that this card is a parallel effect, in that both you and your opponent have to discard when this card comes into play, and his ability to dull and break to make you both discard cards is kind of painful. However, you being the player that sort of controls this card, that plays this card, you get to determine when to use these effects. So the ideal scenario is if you're in a situation where you've got like a board set and you've played some cards, and Kazusa is the final card in your hand, you just tap your final backup, put him into play, and you got no cards to discard, and your opponent discards a card. So in that regard, it's quite efficient for what it does there. And yeah, same thing with its dull ability. You can just dull it when you've got no cards and your opponent's got cards, and you're forcing them to discard a card. So in this regard, this card is really efficient for a discard card. And if discard control were more of a thing, then this card should definitely see play. The fact that this card is a unique card isn't so much of an issue, because his ability to innately break himself will just like sort of counteract that. You can put one into play, break it later, make your opponent discard a card, and then when you're in a situation when you don't have one of these, you can just play a secondary one in a similar situation where you have no cards in hand. So I think this card can build up a lot of advantage simply because it costs 1 backup. You straight up forcing your opponent to discard in the ideal situation, and then later on you can break it again and force your opponent to discard. So in this regard, it's like really quite efficient. And so yeah, if Ice discard were ever to become a thing, I bet Kazusa and Emina are going to be the centerpiece for that deck. Next card is Katar Bashtar. So it's a 4-cost 8,000 power forward, and it has an EX burst. When Katar Bashtar attacks, choose one forward of cost 3 or less, and opponent controls and freeze it. So just to clarify, when it is an EX burst, you ignore the trigger part of it, so you ignore the when he attacks. So basically his EX burst is just freeze a forward of cost 3 or less. In that regard, I don't think this card is particularly a good card, because 4-cost 8,000 power is a very, very contested slot in like every deck. Except maybe Wind? Yeah, except maybe Wind, I think. But yeah, 8,000 power for 4 is standard. If you're not getting 8,000 for 4, you really need ability to sort of really justify putting the card into the deck. And this card, I don't think his ability is sort of justifies it. You've already got Laguna, which has been a staple for a long time for ice decks, who has a very similar effect. Albeit, Laguna has 1,000 less power, but Laguna does have synergy with Renoa and Squall. And Laguna's ability as an EX burst is better. So I don't think this card is going to be enough to sort of take Laguna away from that. EX bursting forward, but EX bursting to freeze opponents forward of 3 or less is actually a very narrow effect, and it doesn't sort of affect enough cards, and its effect isn't sort of potent enough. If it was, say, dull and freeze a character of 3 or less, then potentially, but at this stage, Laguna does what it does better. Next card is Ephemeral Gunner. So Ephemeral Gunner is the Laguna mannequin. It's a 4-cost, 8,000 power forward. When Ephemeral Gunner deals damage to opponent, so it deals damage to the player, choose one dull forward your opponent controls and deal at 5,000. So it's an effect that's sort of like a toned down but very reminiscent effect to Legendary Laguna from Opus 1. In this regard, I think that this card it's not a bad card, it's fine. So technically, it offers a reasonable ability and it has a reasonable body, but it's not impressive enough to really sort of push it up towards any sort of to any sort of like higher level play. In this regard, 5,000 damage isn't a lot. If it was 6,000 damage, then an argument can be made in that you can sort of like break small units. But at 5,000, you're really sort of hitting the really, really small units. Unless you're really sort of comboing this ability with some sort of follow-up damage or some sort of way to, generally just any sort of like follow-up damage, it's really gonna be hard to capitalize on this guy. So if you are putting your opponent in a situation where you are attacking them directly, and Ice has a lot of ways to sort of like dull and freeze your opponent, so you can do that. I don't think this card by itself has a big enough payoff for that. So this card by itself, even if he does deal damage to your opponent directly and like sort of fulfills his requirement, it's not enough to get your card advantage. You need to combo it with something else, and I think that I don't think that is good enough to justify playing this card. Next card is Edward. So Edward is a 3-cost ice backup, and his ability is for 1 ice, 1 CP, and dull. Your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. You can only use this ability during your turn. He also has an S ability called Escape, where just by discarding an Edward, your Edward cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities this turn. So again, this is another card that sort of like goes into the sort of discard control style of play. I have mixed feelings about this card. So on one hand, yes, it is inefficient in that effectively you're discarding one of your opponent's cards, so you're basically making them lose 2 CP in exchange for you effectively paying 3 CP because you're paying Ice, Colorless, and dulling this backup. So in that regard, you are sort of spending more resources than your opponent to get rid of your opponent's resources. That being said though, like, if you consider the fact that each of your backups generates 1 CP every turn, if you're ahead on CP on your opponent, then you can justify spending extra CP to deal with your opponent's cards, because if you're ahead backup wise, then you can you're naturally recurring or gaining more resources than your opponent. So this card is really sort of like hinged upon you being able to get a better backup based on your opponent, and then you can just sort of like attrition them down. So potentially so I think the real problem with this card is that people aren't going to experiment enough with this card. But I think that this card is niche enough to potentially see play in an Ice discard deck. The fact that you can only force your opponent to discard on your turn does kind of suck in the regard that you're forced to proactively do it. You can't really sort of do it reactively on your opponent's turn. As say, like, you can't do it at the end of your opponent's turn or during their main phase 2 to just be like, oh yeah, it's gonna come back to my turn. I have some CP opened up. I might as well just do this, force you to discard a card. You know. You have to do it proactively. It takes up 3 of your CP, so that for the rest, like until it comes back to the rest of your turn, you are trying to respond to your opponent's cards with less CP. That being said, though, there are ways to reactivate your backups. Another card, like for example, Shulk, reactivates some of your backups. So potentially, this might have an interesting combo with that. Its S ability is actually surprisingly relevant, I feel, in the sense that if you do build this sort of control style deck. And Edward does sort of become the centerpiece to it. Your opponent, if they are playing like Wind or Earth, they're going to want to get rid of this guy. They're going to just say, screw it, I have had enough of this bullshit. I am going to use Hecaton Carrier or Archer, blow that piece of shit up. And then in that situation, you can just be like, oh yeah, I just happen to have an extra ebba on hand, escape, like negate the ability. So that's kind of cool in that regard. If you do sort of build a deck around this. So yeah, like I'm not sure. I think it's like too fiddly to sort of be in that sort of like a top tier competitive deck. And that's the thing though. Like when you're talking about like top tier competitive decks, a lot of time like they have to be consistent and they have to be able to have a very relevant effect 95% of the time where you play them. And I think that this card, it's got like a good enough effect maybe 60% of the time, you know? So, and I think that probability is what's going to push him out of competitive play. That being said though, if you are cool with like sort of playing like a tier 1.5, tier 2 sort of like casual deck, this guy is definitely going to be fun. Well, fun for you as a player. It's going to be like pretty annoying for your opponent because fun police decks are probably the least fun decks for players to be playing against. And yeah, so like totally, if you want to build a casual deck, or like a semi-competitive deck, then this might see play. Yeah. Moving on to the first Ice Legendary, we have Kuja. So Kuja is a 7,000 power forward at free CP, so that's exactly where you want to be. And when Kuja attacks, you can choose one forward. You may pay 1 CP if you do dull it. And when he attacks, choose one forward. You may pay 1 ice if you do freeze a forward. So in this regard, just to clarify first, that when you attack, you because both of these trigger off when he attacks, you can choose to put these on the stack in either order. So you can use the dull one first or the freeze one first. So in that regard, you can dull one guy and freeze the same guy if you're paying the cost. At the same time, they're two distinct costs though. So you can't pay the 1 ice and fulfill both. And if you're discarding a card, you cannot discard a card to pay for both effects. So so this card is a card that's really going to bank on you having backups in order to use effectively. That being said though, it feels a very similar role, like maybe a little with a slightly better body than Snow. And Snow was a card that saw a lot of play during Opus 1, simply because it was efficient 1-cost backup, and it was just dulling your opponent's forwards, and it kind of had a random bonus if they played like Shiva during the turn. So I'm not sure about this card actually. So like on paper, it's like well statted and it's got a relevant ability. And yeah, so like Ice definitely has the most abilities to dull and freeze. And having a renewable way to dull and freeze is what Ice really wants, because a lot of, in previous like sort of sets, a lot of times when you want to dull and freeze, they all are sort of consumed effects. They're all like say like Renoa or like backups or Shiva. These are all once-off use effects. You pay for an effect and you get it once off. Kuja is a renewable effect. It's like every turn, as long as you can pay for it, you can trigger off a dull and a freeze effect. Potentially you can lock down 2 guys. So effectively, if you can keep one guy frozen permanently and you can like dull like whatever new guy that they have, Kuja's able to lock down a lot of guys and he's able to attack through. That being said though, he does have kind of a niche weakness against cards such as Deleter, in that Kuja has to choose a forward. And so yeah, in a situation where he's doing it, even if he chooses not to pay and he has to choose the leader, he can sometimes break off that. So, yeah, so this Kuja, it ticks all the boxes. Only time will tell if it sort of fulfills the sort of like more like control style ice play. Next card is Kurozame. So Kurozame is the third card that sort of forms this Emina Kazusa Kurozame trio. So when Kurozame enters, it's a 5-cost forward at 9,000 power. So it's about where you really want to be. And when he enters the field, choose 2 forwards an opponent controls and freeze them. Its ability is a little bit lackluster in my opinion. So effectively, it's got a very similar ability to Jul Nabat, which a lot of ice decks play 3 copies of anyways. The bad thing, like, it's like, at that cost, I like kind of would have expected it to be an EX burst. So like, the fact that you can't just like randomly freeze 2 guys from an EX burst kind of sucks. But I do suppose, when you have Eminer out, it does make him a 4-cost 9,000 forward that freezes 2 guys. And that's pretty value. So in most cases, playing a 4-cost forward at 9,000 power, it's either going to have a drawback, or it's got to have, some, or you need some sort of support in order to get there. So I think this card is fine. Like, I think the big problem is though, like, when you play a 5-drop, because you can't have that many 5-drops in your deck, in general. You can't have that many 5-drops in your deck. There are a couple of exceptions to the rule for sure. Yeah, so this card sort of doesn't have enough of an impact. Doesn't have enough of an impact to win you the game. Generally, you want your 5 costs to come in because you ramp up into them and be either really difficult for your opponent to deal with, or have a really strong effect that's really going to push you over the edge. And I think that this his effect is a sort of consumable one-off effect, and it's kind of not good enough, not sort of explosive enough, not sort of really push you ahead enough. And so yeah, so I don't really, yeah. So obviously you can make an efficient deck using him and Emina. You can just spam, like spam him out again and again. But I am skeptical. Yeah. Next card is Shiva. So this card was single-handedly probably the card that ruined the most pre-releases for Opus 3. And it's a 2-cost summon, choose 2 forwards and double them. So this card is both good on offense and defense in the sense that if you're on defense, you can just double 2 of your opponent's forwards and they can't attack for the turn. And also in addition, it's kind of great in that after you do that, those forwards are dulled, so you can then send your guys in to attack them directly, and they generally can't respond unless they have 3 or more guys. So yeah, this card seems strong, and it's another great card that combos with first 1-cost Snow. So that's a great combination as well, because like say if your opponent's got say 3 guys, you can Shiva 2 of them, and then you can attack with Snow, like dull and freeze the 3rd guy. So yeah, I think this card is good. The fact that it doesn't have EX Burst kind of sucks, but if it did have EX Burst, it probably would be too strong. I think that, so this definitely seems like a tempo-orientated ice card, so potentially if we do see like a tempo-orientated like Ice Fire deck, I think. There were some builds in Opus 2 that were like Ice Fire that sort of ran these weenies that sort of like sent them in again and again. Yeah, I think this card should see play in the right sort of ice decks. It's got a lot of value, and it's named Shiva, which is fantastic in certain situations. That being said, though, as a little disclaimer, it's not just like an instant like 2 or 3 off in like every ice deck. In sort of more controlling ice decks, I don't feel that this card sort of fulfills enough of a role to sort of allow the control deck to sort of gain more resources. It's really sort of it's really a resource consumer in that you're discarding a card. You're spending up the card. You're paying 2 CP to stop your opponents from being stop 2 of your opponents' forwards from attacking and blocking for a turn. So it's a real tempo orientated card, and it's a really good tempo orientated card for that matter. If you consider say like Water, who are playing Sildra, paying 6 to bounce 2 guys, or Fire, who pay 9 for Bahamut to get rid of 2 guys. This card is significantly lower costed in order to disable your opponent's forwards and to go through. Obviously, it's got weaknesses in that like Wind can reactivate guys, and Earth has like cards such as Guy that can make them undullable. So it does have its weaknesses, but as a tempo oriented card against like say 80% of cards, it's good. So yeah, it'll see play in tempo oriented ice decks. So like ice / something else decks. Yeah. Next card is Genesis. So Genesis is the second legendary for Ice. It is a 4-cost forward at 7,000 power, so it's a little bit below the curve. Sits at the same sort of power level as Laguna. When Genesis enters the field, choose 1 character your opponent controls, dull and freeze it. When Genesis deals damage to your opponent chooses 1 card from their hand and discards it. So this card I like, but I'm not sure if it's good enough. So in the sense that like 7,000 power for 4, it's below the curve. You can sort of like mentally justify it as saying, oh, you're kind of like got a 3-cost 7,000 power forward, and you're paying 1 for the dull and freeze effect. Yeah. Similarly, Laguna also fulfills a similar role. So Laguna is like, if you have a Squall, also dull and freeze the guy when it comes into play. The big difference here though is that Laguna's secondary ability is to just get plus 2,000 power when you have a Squall to go up to 9,000. Whereas Genesis' ability is when he attacks your opponent directly, they discard a card. So, like in this regard, Genesis is sort of a more tempo orientated card. So if you can get tempo, disable your opponent's forwards, send your guys in, you are sort of hitting their personal resources, their cards in their hand as well. So this card, I reckon, potentially should see play in it's definitely a tempo orientated card. I don't think it's a control style card, because it's sort of it doesn't have enough longevity in that it's got 7,000 power. It's not going to get over a lot of guys, or it's going to trade with a lot of guys. So in that regard, it doesn't have enough power to sort of really stop your opponent. And the once off come in and dull and freeze effect, that's not a control effect, that's a tempo effect. It's an effect that comes in and has an immediate effect now, but doesn't have a longer effect. So this card's going to be a tempo card. I think a lot of people are just immediately jumping towards like control ice with say Renoas and Veins to keep your opponent's guys locked down just permanently and slowly leak through damage. That being said, this is another great card that sort of combines with Devout. So being able to pitch this guy and then pull him back in with Devout for just like an instant dull and freeze on opponent is really quite strong. And like, let's say if you were to combine it with Ice Lightning, goddamn, this combination happens so often. If you were to like say play this guy, dull and freeze your opponent, and then you say Red Mage, send them in, you're straight away just like disabling one of your opponent's guys, send the guy in, and then you're forcing your opponent to discard a card. So in that regard, that's pretty cool as well. So yeah, there's definitely potential for this card. It's just really just waiting on time for people to like sort of switch around. And the same thing sort of happened with Opus 2 in that like early on you saw a lot of lightning, but then as the sort of metagame developed, you saw like all these other variants of different decks sort of come out. You had a little bit of earth popping up, you had like water wind popping up, and you had like all these other sort of decks popping up. So I think that this card is like more control or like complicated decks are always going to take longer because players are going to require more time to sort of figure out all the little bits and pieces of these decks. But this card has a lot of potential, it combos with a lot of things, and it has like a good effect. And so I think we just got to wait for some time to pass for people to figure this card out and to play it. But I think that this card is going to be a sleeper good legendary. Next card is Genesis Avatar. And so there was a kind of mistranslation on this card. So on the card it says that when it enters the field, deals damage to all your opponent's forwards equal to half this card's power. But what it should say is deal damage to all forwards your opponent controls equal to half of their power. So it's dealing half of the receiving forward's power, not half of Genesis' power. So that kind of really affects the relevance of this card. So previously you just play this guy and all your opponent's guys take 5,000 damage, assuming that you have no buffs or anything. But now it's you play this guy and all your opponent's guys are like half damage. And that's significantly worse in my opinion. Because Genesis Avatar already has like a strong base body at 9,000. So he's a 6 cost forward at 9,000 power. So in that regard, it wasn't terrible to just play this guy for 6, have a 9,000 body, just like spread 5k over your opponent's guys. But now it's significantly worse in that you're never going to kill anything. Previously, you can kill 5ks with this, but now you can't kill anything with it. And yeah, even like in some of the people have been saying, oh yeah, if you combine this card with Time Mage, then you can like wipe the entire board. Dude, there are much easier ways to wipe your opponent's board instead of playing this 6 cost combo and like a 4 cost Time Mage combo. Yeah, there's way easier ways to like sort of wipe your opponent's board, and yeah, this card is not good. Definitely not good anymore. Also as a side note, he's got a secondary ability in that his name is Genesis for all situations. So this is an effect that's kind of new in the game in that it's not a field effect in that like for all purposes his name is Genesis. So that includes hand, deck, and so on. So while you have a Genesis out on the field, you cannot play this card. Also, this ability can't sort of really be negated. So there's certain abilities there's certain cards that remove abilities from a card. So the ability this card is also named Genesis is not really an ability in that he can't lose it. So you can't say use Waka to make him lose his ability and then you can play Genesis because he's named differently. So that's another little just sort of interesting little tidbit there. This card, don't play it anymore. Unless there's some bullshit combo that we figure out, don't play this card. Next card is Shulk. So Shulk is a 3 cost backup, and when you deal damage to your opponent, activate Shulk. For Ice 2 CP dull, so you're paying, 5 CP? That can't be right. Might not be right. I'll have to review this. I think it might be just Ice 2 CP. So I'll have to review this later. You can choose one forward and dull it. And, so in this regard, it's a 3 cost backup, and like, I don't really like that it's a 3 cost backup. I think, yeah, if it was a 2 cost backup, still, like, it'd be a little bit too strong, but I think, like, its cost really should be somewhere like 2.5. In that, so over the course of a game, you will deal your opponent 6 damage and then 7th damage is lethal. So there will be potentially 6 times where it can reactivate on your opponent, assuming that there's no ways in the future to remove damage or whatnot. So you're not really you're not really capitalizing on the first ability way too much. And the second ability to just pay a huge amount to dull an opponent's forward, I don't think that is good enough. There are plenty of more efficient, cheaper ways to to dull your opponent's cards. For example, as we were talking about Shiva before, Armon has been a staple in Ice Lightning in that he comes into play, has an immediate dull effect, and has continuous dull ability. The fact that you can reactivate this card just so you can overpay for its effect again, I don't think justifies it. So I don't think playing this card is a good idea. Next card is Sid Ulstein. So Sid Ulstein is a 5-cost, 9,000 power forward. It's got an EX burst. When Sid Ulstein enters the field, choose one forward an opponent controls. If your opponent's hand is 0 cards, break it. I don't think that this card... Okay, I suppose one step at a time. So its ability obviously is for sort of ice discard, in that you want to get your opponents down to 0 cards. Play this guy, bang, it's a 5 for 9k, that's a good body. And if your opponent's got no cards in hand, you blow up one of their dudes as well. So, like value-wise, that's actually really good. In the sense that, yeah, you blow up a guy, so you're killing anything from, like, say, a 3 to a 5-drop. And you're getting a body with that. So that's good value. And with ice, that's definitely a deck that can capitalize and sort of, like, capitalize on this ability and to sort of force your opponent into having 0 cards in hand. That being said, though, its EX burst is like almost irrelevant in the game, in the sense that when you're EX bursting, 99% of the time it's because your opponent's attacking, right? And most of the time when your opponent's attacking you, they've generally got cards in their hand. So yeah, especially considering, like, I just go back to this again and again. Good players, they know you do not play cards before you attack, because if you play a new guy and there's a big EX burst, they can kill your new guy. So your opponent generally never plays guys before they attack. So your opponent is going to draw 2 cards, declare some attacks, and what do you know? You flip this card, your opponent's got 2 cards in hand at least, right? So this card's like going to do nothing as an EX burst like 99% of the time. So this card is like really fidgety, but then again, like, ice doesn't have like a lot of quality sort of like 5-cost big guy forwards. Currently, like, ice is running like Laguna as a 5-cost, like, if they are running 5-cost forwards. And I think, yeah, if you're running like a discard heavy deck and like there's a lot of discard effects right now that can like make it happen, then yeah, this card will see play. I suppose on a side note, like, sort of Kuja, 5-cost Kuja was probably the 5-cost ice forward that a lot of ice decks played. So I don't think it's really going to knock off 5-cost Kuja. Unless they're playing 3-cost Kuja, then take away 5-cost Kuja, then this can be the new 5-cost guy. But yeah. So, like, it's going to be iffy. It might see, like, play as, like, a 1 or 2 of in, like, discard decks. Definitely if you can trigger it off, that's huge value to you. Especially considering, like, if, like, for those sort of decks that are forcing your opponent to discard, they generally aren't fighting particularly well. So while your opponent is, like, sort of capitalizing on your weak board state to attack you, you just get rid of their entire hand, and then as soon as you get, like, rid of their entire hand, then you can play this guy, bang, blow a guy up, and equalize the board. So this guy could see play. Definitely if he sees play, I think it'd be like a tier 1.5, almost pushing tier 1 deck. Next card is Zelira the Death Seraph. So it's a 4-cost summon. Break all dull forwards your opponent controls of cost 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. So basically, the forwards that it doesn't hit is 1-cost forwards, 4-cost forwards, 6-cost forwards, 8 and 9. So that sort of leaves some very interesting sort of metagame predictions for this card, in that it hits 3s and 5s, so that's good. Those are probably going to be most of the things that you want to hit. Against goal-based decks, hitting like dull 2-cost is like good. This card I think is strong. The fact that it doesn't choose is fantastic. So it gives ice yet another out against legendary deleter. Not like they already had like good options in regards to Mateus as well. So this card just sort of gives them another option. It's like a great control card because ice has plenty of ways to just dull and freeze your opponent's stuff, and then this card just goes bang bang bang, a whole bunch of them dead. I just paid for this. So this card is like, I think it's like a more efficient situational Shantoto for ice. So it's like going to in niche situations, it's not going to be great. But I think there's a lot of cards that are at 5 in this set right now, and a lot of them going to see play. Just like even cards like Steiner, which is like, which people treat it as like a very cheap, efficient card, but it's a 5 cost, right? So yeah, this can break that as well. And yeah, and you can do it as a summon. So there'll be times where you just need to desperately block an attack. Your opponent, if they don't have Brave, they will attack, and you just go bang. I chuck down Death Seraph, kill your attacking forward, you know, and I don't even have to choose it. So you like abilities that sort of prevent it from being chosen. They can't do anything against this. That being said, though, it doesn't hit 4s, and 4s are probably the most prevalent costed forwards in the game. Maybe a little bit less so with this set, but in Opus 2 and before, 4 costs were like the staples to most decks, and this not hitting 4 kind of sucks, but it does everything else really good. So this card, I think in ice decks, especially sort of like mid-rangey ice decks that sort of like want to combat more, this card is going to be good. You're going to see it as like a 2-off, I bet. Next card is Zeza, which is it's like another Dawn Warrior. So actually, it's the first Dawn Warrior we've talked about. So it's a Dawn Warrior. There are 4 forwards in this set that are Dawn Warriors. Someone tried to explain to me the lore about them, but basically they're like old guys, old guy warriors, veteran warriors. So Zizat is the first one. It is a 5 cost forward at 8,000 power, so it's below the curve. It's got first strike on it, and if you control like Galuf, Kurga, or Dorgan, so one of the other 3 Dawn Warriors, then Zeza gets plus 1,000 and Brave. So not actually like it's just like it's not good, but I wouldn't say it's terrible. Okay, so it's somewhere between mediocre to okay. All right. So 8,000 first strike is cool. That's handy. And if you have like one of the other guys, he's got plus 1,000 and Brave, so that's pretty good. Like from some recent testing, not specifically of this card, but 9,000 power Brave first strike is actually like a pretty bullshit combo. Like pretty bullshit combination of like abilities. Cause like you attack with this guy, 9,000, like your opponent doesn't want to block that shit, you know? 9,000 power is like this really good number to hit. And so like if he's first striking at 9,000, in general, like not many forwards like can stay at 10,000 power. So most forwards, if they get up to 10,000 power, it's usually from some sort of buff. Or it's like they're playing a 9,000 power forward and it has one of like the 1k buff cards. So in this regard, there's been an interesting deck that's been going on the internet that combines this with Kurga. It's gonna be a fun deck. Look, people keep telling me, hey, Jason, you gotta build like 4 Dawn Warrior control. It's not gonna be a thing, but like it's going to seem fun and interesting. It's gonna be a casual card, but when you pull it off, there are gonna be times where your opponent's like, oh shit, I can't believe I wrote off this card. But like internally, you as the player are just like, God damn it, I pulled off this combo once. This isn't a terrible card for once. But yeah, and sometimes you just gotta have fun with the game. So this is a fun card. So yeah, next card is Sephiroth. Sephiroth is a 4 cost forward, 8,000 power, EX burst. When Sephiroth is put from the field into the break zone, you may search your deck for a Dark Element Sephiroth and add it to your hand. So, most cards, when they get you a resource, they are undercosted for their size because their cost sort of justifies their ability to net you resources. This is one of the few cards where you have a card that's completely on curve. So it's a 4,000 for 8, and he has an ability that sort of nets you an extra card. I suppose they justify it because dark cards fundamentally can't be discarded for CP. Fundamentally can't be discarded for CP. So this card is designed for like one of the like Dark Sephiroth like backup destruction sort of type decks. So you got 2 targets with this. You got 8 cost Legendary Sephiroth, or you've got promotional Sephiroth. That's 4 cost. And obviously, if you're running this Sephiroth, then you can you have extra Sephiroths that you can discard using like the promo Sephiroth ability. In that regard, like breaking backups is pretty inefficient in this game. You pay a lot to break your opponent's backups, and in a lot of cases, like breaking your backups isn't even good. Like if your opponent's got like consumable backups such as Raoban, breaking Raoban is actually terrible because it means that your opponent's like, oh sweet, I was going to have to play Deleter to like play Raoban again, but you just did that for me, so I'll just play another Raoban and kill your Sephiroth. You know? So, in certain, it's efficient, but it's not going in a good deck. Potentially, if we do see sort of like it can be disruptive in the sense that like, hey, like there'll be times where you're playing this backup destruction deck and you're playing against a like more control deck, like say Riku Yuna Pain. Just being able to constantly break your opponent's like Rikus and Yunas might be handy, you know. Let's say if you're like constantly breaking your opponent's Yunas, constantly breaking your opponent's Yunas, all of a sudden they're out of Yunas, so all of a sudden their Riku doesn't draw that many cards. Or like you keep breaking your opponent's Rikus. In a situation, maybe like say, in FF9, like Steiner gets plus 1,000 bonus if they have another Final Fantasy 9 character, and if they don't have Steiner back him up, usually Aiko is there to give him the buff. So like maybe like break Aiko and then like you can win a trade, you can win a combat against Steiner. Little things like that, or maybe like as we were talking about before, use it to break Emina maybe. So like it's a disruption card. But the thing is that you got to have the rest of your shit sorted well enough to be able to spend a ton of resources to break your opponent's backups. That being said, like I can see niche ways where this card could potentially be played, but I think in general it's not good. So more card. So like next couple of cards. So we have DGS Soldier. So Deep Ground Soldier. So it is a 4-cost forward at 8,000 power. So it gives your Ice standard unit forwards plus 2,000 power. So it is a more nichier version of Warrior of Opus 1 Warrior Light, which is the like one that gives standard units in general plus 2,000 power and first strike. So this card is sort of like a sort of like downgraded version of that, in that it only hits Ice forwards, and it only gives them 2,000 power. It doesn't give them first strike as well. That being said though, like Ice actually has quite a couple of like strong like standard unit forwards, like vanilla standard unit forwards. It's got Knight, which is like a free cost 7,000 power, so that's like on curve. So like buffing up to 9,000 is fantastic, you know. And if you're running an Ice deck, you know, you can run Juclark, pump them up by another grand. And yeah, all of a sudden you're just like zerging down with these guys. But this card is really sort of designed to sort of combine with the two following cards. So Deep Ground Soldier free cost is 5,000 power forward, so it's below the curve. And when it enters the field, you may search your deck for a DGS Soldier and add to your hand. So the free cost one searches for the 4-cost one, and yeah, it's 5,000 power. So realistically, you should be looking at it mentally from as a 1-cost, because it nets you a card back. So in that regard, this card is actually pretty damn efficient, in that you can just spam these guys out and they're just like netting you cards. And then all of a sudden you've got like 3 or 4 of these guys. You play like the big soldier, give them all plus 2,000. Maybe they'll be able to fight reasonably well. And you've got a ton of dudes, right? So in this regard, this deck's like, this card's gonna be like in a fun gimmick deck. But it's a fun gimmick deck. Potentially we might see like an Ice Water build where you're running Warrior Light as well, to make them even stronger, like giving them plus 4,000 and first strike is like, sounds pretty crazy actually. So yeah, like I would not be surprised that this goes into a deck that has a surprising amount of impact. Yeah. And just to sort of follow up, here's Deep Ground Soldier, the 2-cost one. It's a 3,000 power forward, so effectively you're getting the size of a 1-cost forward. So almost in a way it's kind of free, you know. You discard a card, play this guy, you get Deep Ground Soldier, like the 3-cost Deep Ground Soldier, and add it to your hand. So this card, you discard a card, you get a 3-cost Deep Ground Soldier. So it's fundamentally a free card, right? It's fundamentally a free card. It's almost like a Zidane, in that regard. So obviously, like, if you spam these guys out, if you give them plus 4,000 power, they're now able to first strike, like 3 cost 7,000 power forwards. For a free card, that's actually not bad, right? This deck's gonna be fun and gimmicky. And when you pull it off, your opponent's just gonna be like, oh yeah, like, I spent all these resources killing each one of you guys, but he just like spams out more of them. Okay, next card is Time Mage. So Time Mage is a 2-cost backup. 2-cost backup. It's a standard unit, so you can put as many of these into play. And its ability is, for free Ice, Dull, and Break Time Mage, choose one forward you control, remove it from the game, then return it to the field dull. You can only use this ability during your turn. So this is an ability that's sort of like seen play in like Magic the Gathering and a whole lot of other effects as well. or a whole lot of other card games as well. So there are two fundamental relevant aspects of this. So it's like, oh yeah, why would you like remove a guy and then put it straight back in using this effect? So first, reason number one is if your opponent has anything that's choosing it, then when it comes back, it's considered a new card. So your opponent's ability or your opponent's summon is no longer choosing it. So in one way, it can be dodging abilities. So let's say if your opponent uses, say, like the water summon Choo Choo Lane to give one of your forwards minus 3,000 or 4,000 when you're attacking with it, right? And so your forward's going to die. You can do this in response, pull this guy out and put this guy in. First of all, so your guy doesn't die from combat, and secondly, because the target is no longer valid, the original target for Choo Choo Lane is no longer valid, the effect fizzles out and your opponent doesn't get to draw a card because the original chosen target is no longer there. It's a fresh new forward. It's considered a completely different forward. It just fizzles out their ability, so they don't get to draw a card. So in that regard, it's got first there's a defensive ability when you're going on offense, and secondly, and this is the ability that gets people more excited more often, is that when the card comes back into play, it gets to reuse its enter into play ability. So there's a ton of cards with really strong enter into play abilities, such as as we were talking about, say Laguna or Genesis, or even Genesis Avatar, worst case, Genesis Avatar. You pull them out, you put them back in, they immediately their enter into play abilities sort of get added onto the stack. Even something like Armon, really, you pull them out, put them back in, you're dulling a guy. So this card has a lot of flexibility. The fact that you have to pay free ice is a little bit limiting though, because if it was 2 ice, 1 CP dull, then all you'd have to do is discard an ice card, tap any backup and do this effect. But the fact that you have to pay free CP means you have to have another ice backup, discard an ice card, and then do this. Or have you just 3 other ice backups. So it's very limited because of the cost to play this card. And I think that's the real big limiting factor about this card, is that the fact that you are forced to pay free ice for it, potentially if this card was put into a win deck, there are plenty of great enter into play win abilities, if you pull out a 5-cost spots, put them back in, reactivate all your win guys, if you have a ton of win backups and a ton of win forwards, you can just during your turn attack, do with all your stuff, use your backups to do some stuff, pull out Bartz, put Bartz back in. Bartz reactivates himself actually, because Bartz comes in dull but reactivates himself. Actually, this gives me some very interesting ideas when I think about it. And then just he reactivates all your other win guys. But the fact that you have to pay free ice makes it very limited in regards to doing that. Actually, this is crazy. The idea just kind of actually sounds kind of fun in my head. So this card is a card with great potential, and this is going to be one of those cards that the longer the game goes, the more people are going to consider which effects are going to really combine well and synergize well with Time Mage. And so this card is a fun combo card for now, and in the future it may be a really powerful competitive combo card. So this card is a sleeper. Someone has to figure out what goes really well with this, and then it's going to be a bomb. It's just going to kick ass. But next card is Harley. So Harley is a 2-cost backup, and literally all it does is the cost to play Edward is reduced by 2. It cannot become 0. So it means that if you're running Opus II Edward, the backup one, it goes from being a 4-cost to a 2-cost backup. You can play it, and it becomes cheaper. Or if you're running Edward from this set, it goes from a 3-cost backup to a 1-cost backup. So that's really cheap to get in, and you can just start ramping up the discard really quickly. I don't think this card is good enough. Obviously this card will only see play in a deck where you're playing Edward. And if you're running this card in more than say a single copy, 1 or 2 copies, you are hardcore putting your eggs into the Edward basket. Which actually may not be too terrible, because it's not a fragile combo. Because if you go free Edward, free of this chick, right? You can put this chick in, get your Edward in real cheap, and your extra Edwards are not dead, right? Because if you build your deck around a single combo, if your opponent can break that combo, your deck falls apart. But Edward innately has an ability called Escape that just makes stuff untargetable to him. So if your opponent is oh yeah, I'm going to Hecaton or Archer him, you got bang, I've got extra Edwards, stop that shit, my combo is still good. So I don't really think you'll see play, but realistically, if you just want to play casual stuff during the weekend, you like just want to have fun, this card's fine. You know, just put it in, get your Edward in, and then just like fun police your opponent. That being said, like older Edward backups all require ice to do stuff, so this is just like a handy in. So, you know, put this chick in, put Edward in real cheap, and you've got like an ice backup to tap with Edward, you know. So that's fantastic. So it like synergizes well with that. So in the process of being able to use Edward, you get this chick that makes Edward cheaper. So that's really good synergy. So it's, literally from a synergistic point of view, it's good. It meshes really well with Edward, but the end result, I don't think it's like justified. And next card is White Tiger Lassie Kunmi. So it is a 6,000 power forward at 3, so it's below the curve. It's got First Strike, which is always a fantastic ability to have. And when one or more of your forwards are chosen by your opponent's summon, cancel it unless your opponent plays free CP. So this is a really strong like sort of control protection effect in that if your opponent's trying to use like obviously if your opponent trying to cast summons, they have to pay 3 more. So first note, if your opponent flips a summon off an EX burst, this does not stop that. Even if your opponent is unable to pay free CP, the summon resolves and like does whatever it does. And even if they can't pay the free CP, this effect cannot cancel it just because EX breaks resolve before any sort of triggers occur. So this card does not protect your guys from EX bursts. That being said, though, this card's a fun card, and like there will be certain times where your opponent just kind of gets a little ahead of themselves, and they're like, "All right, I'm just gonna cast a summon and like wreck one of your guys," and you're like, "Oh yeah, do you have the free extra CP to like make sure your like summon doesn't get wrecked?" And they're like, "Oh," and then the summon gets negated, you know, which like in stark contrast to free cost Terror from Opus 1, which just makes summons cost 1 more. You don't have the ability to just like negate your opponent's summon. Like your opponent might say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to like pay 3 for Hecaton Care," and you're like, "Oh no, it costs 4 instead," and they're like, "Oh man, I don't have the CP 4. I guess I have to take that back," because they can't play it, right? This card is like different in that it will negate it. So if your opponent plays this stuff and you're like, "Oh, do you have the free CP extra to like make sure it goes through?" and they don't, then all of those resources and that summon is just gone. So this is a way better way better countering effect, or way better sort of mind gaming baiting like type ability than Terra is. Also, as a very interesting side note, if your opponent plays a summon and mentally they're like, "Oh cool, I've got free CP available in order to pay like this ability," so your opponent plays a summon, this effect triggers on top. So that's like, so they have to pay free CP unless they have to pay free CP, and they've got say only like 1 card in hand and the backup open. You can then stack an ability such as like Kazusa on top to make them discard that card. So they discard the card, and then when this resolves, if all of a sudden if your opponent no longer has the ability to pay that free CP to like allow their summon to go forward, then all of a sudden you've cancelled their summon. You baited your opponent into casting a summon. Yeah, you baited your opponent into casting a summon by using a discard effect before that. So I think this is actually like a cool, interesting thing about this card that people don't realize, is that you can bait your opponent into casting a summon. They will think that they can pay the extra. And if like you're playing ice, and there's a million ways to make your opponent discard cards in ice. If in ice you can just make them discard in response to that trigger, you can just negate their entire summon, bait them into a really bad sort of putting all their eggs into that summon's into that summon, and then like just knock it all over in one go. So that's huge potential. And I think that's the thing that people are not really valuing about this card. That this card has the potential to just bait your opponents into like really bad situations. So yeah, I like this card, and I really love mind gamey sort of cards. So yeah. So just for you people out there, if your opponent has discard abilities and has this card, and you're going to play summon, discard your cards to cast a summon and keep your backups open, because it's unlikely they're going to be able to dull your backups in response to it. But yeah. But like, even in that situation, Ice is already happy with that situation, because they're like, "Oh yeah, what do we want to make him to do? Discard cards from their hands." They're discarding cards from their hand instead of using their backups just to play a card, just to play summon. So it's a lose-lose situation. Except one situation is just way more of a bullshit loss than the like sort of, okay, I'll just hedge my bets and discard the cards first. So yeah. Interesting one to know. And next one is White Tiger Lassie Nimbus. So it is a free cost 8,000 power forward and it has Brave. So that's stat-wise is fantastic already. You know, it's plus 1,000 more than it should be, and it's got Brave, which is a really strong ability, and it's going to be increasingly more relevant in this set, simply because Ice wants to get around stuff, simply because there's a lot of Earth cards that sort of break dull forwards. So being Brave is very, very relevant now. So yeah, so stat-wise, it's got all the good things. Its cost or issue, though, is that you can, like, and there's been some, like, translation issues on this game. So effectively what this card should say is you can only play this card by paying for it to enter play with Ice backups you control. So what that means is that you cannot use abilities such as Shulk or Shulk or abilities that sort of bring in another forward from your hand for free. You cannot use those abilities to put this guy into play. So he cannot be brought into play like with Devout even. So he can't be brought into play. He must be played, right, from your hand by paying his normal cost. And secondly, his cost must entirely be paid from Ice backups you control. Okay? So you cannot use Chaos or Cosmos to create Ice CP. You have to use Ice backups. On an interesting note, if you have a Shantoto, because Shantoto is considered all 6 colors, or if you have a Kamari, and Kamari's has Ice element to him, you can use those to put this guy into play. So fundamentally, you have to dull 3 Ice backups to put this guy into play, and that's pretty big drawback. So obviously, if that wasn't a thing, then this card has a lot of potential. It just comes in, it's really big, and just Brave 8,000 from like turn 1, or turn 2, let's say. But the fact that you have to spend Ice backups means that you have to get 3 backups into play first. I suppose, I'm not even sure if this is even the most ideal situation. I suppose in the, ideal situation, you're going second, so turn 1, you have 7 cards in hand, so you fight first and then you draw 2 more, so you have 7. You discard 3 and get 3 2-cost backups in, so you got 3 backups, and you're just holding the one, Nimbus in your hand. Next time you just tap all 3, put Nimbus down, okay? But I'm not even sure if that's a good idea, you know? Yeah, it's great, you got a Brave 8,000 guy on your second turn. But it sort of really sort of pigeonholes you, and that's a very difficult combo to just gather all up, right? You have to be running a whole lot of 2-cost backups to get that as a early game thing. If you play it as a mid game thing, maybe, just tap free backups, put them into play. But I don't know, it's just sort of very weird to sort of figure out where this card is supposed to be, and yeah, it's I'm not sure where it's supposed to be. Do you play it in a tempo, do you play it in a tempo aggressive deck where you're just trying to get this guy out and sort of force your opponent to deal with him? But in order to do so, you have to put backups in, and you wrapping a lot of backups in means that you're fundamentally not aggressing your opponent hard enough. You can't play him with a tempo orientated card by oh yeah, I'll discard 2 cards, play Shulk or something, or Zagabuff, put this guy to play. You can't do that. So yeah, it doesn't lend itself towards being a tempo card. But then as a control card, it doesn't really have any sort of control abilities. Yes, I suppose it's got Brave, which is kind of handy. So if you're kind of a control deck, in the mid game, you can just pay free, put this guy in, and he's just 8,000 Brave, so that's fine, I suppose, right? So I think this card would be more of just a value play, just for a sort of more mid-rangey Ice deck. You can just put this guy into play and he's just attacking for 8,000 or 9,000 a turn and he's Brave, But that being said, though, sort of more mid-rangey to sort of late gaming Ice decks, they want to dull and freeze. So if this card was say in Earth, or if this card was say in Wind or something, this would be a fantastic card. But the fact that it's in Ice and you're forced to pay Ice for it, is what really hinders this card. And next card is Cannoneer. So Cannoneer is a standard unit 5-cost backup. When he enters the field, choose 2 forwards your opponent controls, dull and freeze them. So it's a very, very strong effect. It's basically 2 Shivas and two Shivas in 1, and it costs 5. So if you consider the fact that 2-cost backups just have kind of a stand ability, this card is kind of giving you double Shiva for kind of 3 or 4 costs on top, right? So value wise, it's pretty strong, and it sort of fulfills a very similar role to like, yeah, as we're talking about, like, say, Sildra or Bahamut, in that you're just disabling 2 guys, right? Similar thing, I suppose, with Jonabat. So in this regard, this card has a very strong opponent effect, and so it sort of fills a very similar role to what summons fill in other decks. Yeah, so like in other decks you use like Sildra or Bahamut, and they're your summons to get through to the end. This might be like the ice equivalent for that. That being said, though, if you really want to just like get over your opponent's guys, you'd rather just pay 2 to cast Shiva. Just dull their guys, send your guys in, and you win, right? Dulling and freezing. This seems more like a mid-rangey sort of tempo type play. So like you got maybe 1 or 2 guys now. You put this guy into play, dull and freeze your opponent's 2 guys. You send your 2 guys in. They don't reactivate, so next turn you can send like those 2 guys in again, maybe. I think it's kind of expensive. Ice doesn't have a lot of like ice isn't really sort of a color that has a lot of things that it needs to put into its backup zone. So for example, if you consider like water or wind, there's a lot of really strong backups, and like a lot of your backups being contested really hard. So if you're playing like Yuna, Riku, Pain, you have like two backup slots committed to Riku and Yuna. If you're playing Sky Pirates, you want to have like Fran and Penelo. If you want to like play Final Fantasy IX, you probably want to play Ico. So and yeah, all these water decks probably want to play Mimwu as well. So yeah, a lot of these decks are fighting for backup space for like ongoing abilities. And Ice doesn't really have that issue. Like, it doesn't feel that Ice has you must have these Ice backups in play to be relevant. Probably the only one is Juglag. And a lot of Ice backups are like consumable, like for example, Devout and stuff. They're like just sort of their backups you put into play, they break and they do their thing. So in this regard, like Artillery, Cannoneer does have space in the Ice deck to be played. As for what role he fulfills, he might just be like a 1 or 2 off, just for like, yeah, in the mid game you can just like put this guy down, lock 2 guys down, and just like end up sending 4 or 5 damage through to your opponent, and it gives you time to like set up, and then maybe all you need from there on out is just 1 successful Renault, and then you can finish your opponent off. So this card has value. Ultimately it's just up to the Ice players to decide whether running 1 or 2 of this card as like a just bomb mid-game play is relevant enough. So I think it's at the stage where it's potentially might be played. Yeah. And final card for Ice is Mystic Knight. So it is a 2-cost forward at 5,000 power. If Mystic Knight would receive damage from summons or abilities, reduce that damage by 5,000. So yeah, obviously it seems like a defensive card, so it's not really going to be like fighting combat all that much. But yeah, if your opponent's like doing damage to your guys, then this can stop the damage. That being said, though, its effect, I suppose, is really sort of only relevant against like sort of AoE or splash type effects. So like board sort of type abilities, because your opponent's never really going to, like, with this effect on this card, your opponent's never going to use a nuke spell on it, right? It just doesn't make sense. Like, oh man, this card takes 5,000 less damage from like abilities and summons. Oh, I guess I'm going to have to throw 3 summons to like kill it. No, it's never going to happen, right? Like, your opponent's just not going to do that. Your opponent's just going to attack you, and like, what's your opponent's what's this 5,000 power 4 going to do? It's not going to be blocking anything. It's just going to like chump block, right? And all of a sudden, its effect is irrelevant. So in this regard, its effect is really only supposed to like hedge against like AoE effects. That being said, though, like like against lightning, it's irrelevant. Like if they're running like Cyclops and it's like AoEing every one for minus 3,000 power, it's irrelevant because it doesn't deal less damage. I don't think this card really sort of like, it's obviously this is a card that would see more play if there were more relevant abilities for it. More like if the field was more filled with like damage type abilities, then this card would potentially see more play. Obviously it's yet another card that sort of dicks around with the Alcid Onion Knight combo, because like if your opponent wants to go like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like Alcid it, oh yeah, like 6k damage minus 5, oh it goes to 1k damage, whatever, and then like Onion Knight follows up for another 0 actually. So this card is resistant to Alcid combo, but like in that sort of situation, your opponent just wouldn't Alcid this, Your opponent just Alcid all the other guys, right? And this guy is not a threat, You put anybody, like literally any forward pretty much, in front of this guy, Mystic Knight is not going to be able to attack through to them. And like if Mystic Knight's there, like, and you're attacking, Mystic Knight's not really blocking either, It's not going to like be protecting you. So it's only kind of like, oh yeah, like it's an armor-plated turret, right? So you got this thing that's not of no value to you, but it's armor plated, so your opponent like can't like if your opponent can't waste bullshit to like get rid of it, but it's always going to be there, right? Um, so yeah, like maybe because it's a standard unit as well, right? So if you play it with like the DGS soldier that gives him plus 2,000, all of a sudden he's a 7,000 power dude that like can't receive significantly less damage, right? But in that situation, your opponent's not going to throw nukes at this guy. Your opponent's going to throw nukes at like your DGS soldier or your warrior elite or whatever. So like yeah, like I don't really know what you can really sort of like put this card into. But yeah, I don't know. We're just like kind of shooting ideas and like talking shit and yeah. So that is it for the ice set. Man, this video went for a little bit longer than I would have liked. I guess I'm going to say that about every video. But then again, I kind of just went on this like really fun sort of like stream of consciousness for this video anyways. Yeah, let me know actually what you guys think about my video formats. Do you think I should be like a little bit more structured and a little bit more sort of concise and like sort of prepare more of a, like a speech or more of like a script to what I'm thinking? Or do you guys kind of just like the sort of like, fun sort of consciousness, stream of consciousness rants where I just kind of talk about stuff and you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of fun or interesting. And it's like very casual and laid back. I suppose it's kind of almost like a single person podcasty type deal. But yeah, so like, let me know in the comments whether you guys like a more structured type thing or whether you just kind of like laid back, sort of semi-comedic type of like chat about this. And yeah, so like, yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'm going to try to pump these out like one a day. So this is the one for today. I'm going to try to get Wind out tomorrow. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching. And if you guys enjoyed, definitely check out, definitely subscribe and like and do all that sort of stuff. If you have any interesting perspectives on cards, then like post them in the comments below. I do try my best to like sort of respond in the comments of what I think and so on. And yeah, so yeah, I'll be getting all of these 6 videos. Probably might do a 7th video actually. 7 videos, and get these all out, in the next couple of days. And then I'm just going to really start slamming out all these deck videos. There's going to be a whole lot of decks I sort of really want to test and show and share with you guys. And like, I'm going to get all that sorted out. Also at the same time, like some Dragon Ball Super stuff, is recently started. So I sort of want to get into that as well. So yeah, so I got a lot of cool content. And now that I've resigned from my job, I can do this just like all the time. So that's going to be great for you guys. I can get a whole lot of content out. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you later. Grand J out.